And hello, my name is Ryan Belmore. I am the owner and publisher of What's Up Noop. Today is Wednesday, October 5th, and we are continuing our conversations with the candidates. We bring this to you last couple of election seasons, and we are chatting this week with candidates for Newport City Council, as well as Newport School Committee. We've already caught up with a number of candidates for both races. You can find them all on whatsupnoop.com. We have more coming up today as well as tomorrow. If you want to catch up, compare and contrast candidates, you can find them all on whatsupnuke.com as well as our interview schedule. Next week, we'll shift to Middletown, and the following week, Portsmouth. Also thrown in there, we will have races for governor, Senate District 11, 12, 13, Secretary of State, Attorney General, and all the races, as well as we will be having deep conversations on the 10 questions that are on the back of the ballot here in Newport, and some of the questions that will be statewide as well. So lots to get to, a lot of interviews coming up. Sign up for our newsletter on whatsupnoop.com to get all of it emailed right to your inbox every single day for free. Coming up, but here today, we have a newcomer to the Newport City Council at-large race. And on your ballot, which you can visit voteri.gov, you can see your sample ballot. He sits at number 3 on nonpartisan council at large, and he is Cy. And Cy, good morning. How are you?
I'm well, Ryan. How are you?
Good. Well, welcome. It's so exciting to speak to somebody new that's running for city council at large. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Ryan. Well, I'm born and raised in Rhode Island. My father was a refugee from Laos, and I stayed in Rhode Island for a good portion of my education. Went to public schools in the East Bay, and then continued on to my undergraduate and graduate degrees at Brown University and law school at Roger Williams School of Law. I am somebody who's worked with governments for almost my entire 18-year career, specifically focusing on helping governments with their finances. I have worked on that realm across the entire country. In addition to that, I've civically served on public boards and commissions for a good portion of my 18-year career. My wife and I live over in the Point neighborhood in Newport. Absolutely love Newport and excited to be in the race for city council.
Now, you're known simply as Cy, but we should make it known or help you and help other people understand that they're going to see a little bit longer of a name on the ballot.
Yeah, I may be one of the first candidates to have a name that takes 2 lines on the ballot rather than just one. My full name is Xaykham Khamsyvoravong. I figured out pretty early in life that, especially in Rhode Island, if I didn't give myself a nickname, someone else was going to give me one. So I just go by Cy, like sigh of relief. It's not the entire name. And I'm thankful that it's at least spelled out for voters on the ballot itself.
Have you had to put it on a campaign sign?
I have. You'll just see Cy on the campaign signs themselves. The last name may actually look like a line under the name. It's so long, but yeah, we're just going with Cy.
And number 3 on your ballot in Newport for nonpartisan council at large. Why now? Why are you running for at large? What you declared your candidacy with the other candidates back in June. What sparked you, or why was this year the right time for you to run at large?
Yeah, look, I love Newport. And one of the things I felt working with governments around the country is that a lot of the challenges Newport's facing, other communities are facing. The difference that I saw here and why I decided to jump into the race is that the pace of those changes is happening a lot faster in Newport. And it's starting to push out the residents that are the entire reason why we love this community. So I thought that with my background, with my experience, those could be helpful things to help put some pragmatic leaders on the city council who could actually get solutions implemented to help people in our community stay here.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about your professional background?
Sure. Well, I started my career off working in the state treasury through the last financial crisis, where I served as the deputy and did a couple different things there, including financings for a lot of the state's big projects, investment troubleshooting, but also policy and legislative affairs, which gave me some helpful insights into the legislative process. After that, I continued on and built a career working in finance with governments. So for a decade, I led the government finance unit for a regional bank called Webster Bank, where we worked with cities and towns and school districts across the entire East Coast to work on financing major public projects. And today I work with a group called U.S. Public Infrastructure Partners that focuses specifically on working with public pension plans to reach better funding levels through investing in public infrastructure projects. Now, throughout that entire process, Outside of my professional work, I've also stayed civically engaged and have been appointed to a number of boards and commissions at the state and local level by both Republicans and Democrats to work on tackling complex financial problems, most notably leading the state's largest drinking water utility for almost a decade.
Providence Water, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So seeing if I could remember off the top of my head here. With all that said, there are 7 candidates at large running for the 4 seats at large. What unique experience do you think you bring?
Government finances are unique. And within the first 6 months of serving on the council, our city council is going to have to tackle the city budget itself. And I've worked public budgets for my entire career. And I think it's important that specifically when we start to think about some of the big challenges that Newport needs to address and tackle, its budget being one of the primary tools it uses to address those challenges, that we really need some people who are ready to hit the ground running. And when you consider that 3 out of the 7 councilors at minimum will be brand new to the city council, I thought it'd be really important to have people who have that requisite background and skill set to be effective right out of the gate.
Yeah, it is a unique time that you have a couple counselors who are on their own stepping away. And there are some changes coming for council and, the way forward. Was there any particular issue or that really got you interested in running right now?
Yeah, certainly. It's housing, right? And it's actually, well, it's 3 issues that kind of tie into housing. It's housing, it's the infrastructure, and it's how we actually get around this island to the neighborhoods that we live in. But housing is something that originally I felt was a major problem for this island right now. And as I got out there and started talking to neighbors in the neighborhood and knocking on doors, have consistently found that is the #1 concern facing our residents. I feel like a lot of our neighbors are feeling the squeeze of the rapid appreciation in property values, raising their property taxes at a rate that they weren't really prepared for. Similarly, on the rental front, I think rents have escalated at a pace that isn't sustainable. And a lot of our friends who are renting feel like they're one lease renewal away from no longer being able to live in Newport. I think that's a major issue, and I think the council needs to focus on doing what it can to help find some solutions to keep our residents here.
Would those couple be what you would deem as your priorities as a newly elected council member?
Absolutely. My top priority right out of the gate is going to be making sure that residents who live in Newport and properties that those residents live inside of pay lower tax rate. I think we need to offer some sort of a break to people who live and work in this community year round, who make it the place that we all love. And I think the best place to start with that is by getting that homestead exemption passed through the council. The General Assembly gave the council the power to do this. Over 6 other communities in Rhode Island have similar exemptions that are available. And when you look at the problems related to housing that we're having in our community, I think it's absolutely essential that we give them that break as quickly as we can.
And that is the Homestead Exemption Act. And so I had that on my list of things to ask you about, but you would be in full support of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, actually working to get that implemented quickly is going to be a really, really important thing. Understanding exactly how the city's legislative process works and ensuring that we maneuver accordingly to get it implemented is important. I also think it's really important that we get it right. A lot of communities look at homestead through the lens of just owner-occupied properties. I think the reality is that when you look at Newport and the high percentage of homes that we have that are occupied by renters, people who call the island home but are renting here, we need to make sure that that homestead extends to those renters. Landlords in Newport need to realize and appreciate that there is a value for them to providing residences for people who live and work here full time. So that's why I think when we start looking at that homestead exemption, it's really important that it includes those properties that are occupied by renters who live here year round.
Now, homestead did come up in front of city council. And a lot of the times we see decisions on city council go 4-3, 3-4. One of the two is usually, how do you plan on working with if elected, your fellow Newport City councilors to push things forward? Because often it seems like, obviously the majority wins, but often it seems like there's always 4 or 3, 4 or against things.
Yeah, there are a couple different issues there. There's the process itself, there's policy, and then there's just sort of the good old-fashioned politics of relationship. I have worked almost my entire career dealing with different legislative bodies. I deal with city and town councils for a living, and my work in the financial sector. I started my career off working at the State House. When I chaired the water utility, I had to work extensively with both the state legislature and the Providence City Council, which I can assure you is no walk in the park. And the way I found success is not reverting into the local tribalism and the history of past conflict that occasionally and regularly exists in smaller communities, but instead really focusing on the policy issues and then working to build sincere relationships with everybody across the board. One of the reasons why I've been appointed to public boards and commissions by both Democrats and Republicans is that I stay very focused on the issues themselves and try to build those direct relationships with the individual people that I need to work with to actually get things done. I think that's where Newport needs to focus moving forward. And I'm hopeful that with a council that has 3 new members on it at minimum, that'll be a great chance to reset and start working to move forward.
Sticking with the council for a little bit, there was a whole charter review process that just went on in the city of Newport, several months. I want to dozens of hours, if not hundreds of hours. 5 questions made the ballot. People will see them 6 through 10, really all just clerical, cleaning them up. Do you think that there should have been some of the recommendations that came from the charter commissions, term limits, how a mayor is chosen, et cetera, that should have made it on this ballot or should make it in the future?
Well, I think we should step back and take a look at the whole charter review process and think about what it means, obviously, for the city's governing structure, and then B, sort of what it tells us about what we might want to improve upon with the city council itself. I love governing documents. I am also an attorney by education, background, and licensing, and built an early part of my career working in public policy. I have a master's in public affairs from Brown University. So I like getting into the weeds of documents like this that ultimately are the governing structures that you work within. And I think the charter review process really highlighted 2 different issues that we need to look at in terms of how the city council uses committees like the Charter Review Committee when it's helping to make better governing decisions. And that really kind of falls into 2 buckets. The first is process, and the second is priorities. I think what we saw here is a process that felt very rushed. The working group that worked on the charter review did excellent work. We had some really outstanding members of our community that served on that charter review commission, but they really didn't have a clear and narrow enough mandate. They were sort of set out and had a very, very broad mandate. And what we saw come back was a very comprehensive report that included everything from the ministerial changes that we're seeing on the ballot being presented to major changes in how we go about electing our government officials and making major decisions at the city level. So I think what would have been beneficial to everybody involved was to have a narrower idea as to what exactly the mandate for that Charter Review Commission was and what the ultimate plan for implementation and consideration of those changes and placing them on the ballot actually was going to be. We do a great job getting really smart people together to come up with great policies and ideas. We don't do as good a job actually charging them also with helping us figure out the strategy to get them implemented and ensuring that they understand the process through which those are implemented. And that's where when we took those recommendations, almost 40 in total, and they got winnowed down by the council, we saw that frustration with the process itself. And that's where the second bucket of issues comes up, which is prioritization. I think everybody has a lot of great ideas, especially this community where we have incredible intellectual horsepower. The challenge is really narrowing down those ideas that we're going to work together to advance. And there wasn't a real clear prioritization of recommendations out of the Charter Review Commission that the council was able to take and really focus on pushing through. So I think if we'd sort of left a lot of that ministerial work to be done by the city solicitor's office, instead really focused on areas where there's substantive policy, that we might have had some better outcomes that would have been more substantive for the Charter Review Commission.
Sticking with the ballot and something that others have argued that may have been rushed is when we move down or back up the ballot from 6 to 10 to 5 is the establishment of a regional school district. Everybody has different thoughts, opinions. What do you think about this process and question 5, which would establish a regional school district?
Yeah, another reason why I felt like it was an important time to get engaged in this process is because I think Newport schools need to be a lot better to deliver on what our students deserve. Both my wife and I are both products of public schools and are a testament to the potential that our public education system should offer to all students. And when we looked at the process that the city was going through for regionalization, what we found is that it was really focused on the money. Look, I'm a numbers guy. I totally understand that and appreciate the importance of focusing on the numbers. But we weren't focusing on the heart of the matter, which is the students and how we actually improve academic outcomes for students. And as I spent more and more time talking to our neighbors and watching the process, what I found was the real question that most of our community wants answered relative to regionalization is, if we decide to share the helm with Middletown on our kids' academic futures, is Middletown sincerely invested in making sure that Newport's kids get a better education than they are today? Or are they going to revert back to the historic animosity that's existed between these communities with regards to education and just take the money and leave us hanging? We don't have a clear answer on that. And until we do, I don't think that I can support regionalization. But I can tell you this. The working group that has been focusing on regionalization is working exceptionally hard to get us the answers that we deserve. I tried to give them some help by recommending that they form a group called the Academic Advisory Committee in advance of regionalization actually being decided. This is the group of educators, teachers, parents, who are representatives from both school districts who get together and come up with what the ultimate academic vision is for a unified school district. Now, currently, as things were originally proposed, that group doesn't get formed until after regionalization is voted on. And then they have a very short few months to actually render their recommendations. So I said, let's give them a longer runway. Start their work now. And that will give us a view into exactly how it is that the people who are going to be actually keeping an eye on our kids every day are going to be talking about our students. The reality is that despite successfully advocating for both councils to effectively adopt resolutions that establish the Academic Advisory Committee, they still haven't met. Now, I'm hopeful that they will. And I continue to advocate for them to actually have their first meetings in a public and transparent manner so we can see what that dialogue's like, so we can see if that builds enough faith with our voters for this to go through. And I'm not ready to give up on that until we get through to the end. You know, our kids' futures are at stake, and we can't walk off the field in the fourth quarter just because we don't see an immediate path to victory. I've worked on a lot of different legislative efforts. I know that you fight and you work on issues to the very end, and we have to hold out hope. But if at the end of the day that isn't met, I will not be supporting regionalization.
And it's just less than 2 weeks away now that people start voting. So in early voting, and then 5 weeks until the general election. I'm just wondering how much more information will come out between now and then. Just a comment, is anything going to come out?
And I don't think it's so much information. It's not substantive information. It's not the substantive policy recommendations, because don't forget, even if the AAC didn't get to work until after the vote, those are non-binding recommendations. You can't bind future legislative bodies unless you have that policy-making authority, which a non-elected body just won't have. But what I do think it'll give us a view into are the sentiments of the people working on this issue, are the attitudes of the people who ultimately our kids are going to be in front of, in the custody of on a day-to-day basis. That's really important, right? I think in talking with people and talking with the working group members who are working on this issue, there's a sincere commitment to helping our kids. I just think we need to make sure that everybody's on the same page on that front. So I don't think it's coming up with a world of solutions in the next, 2 to 3 weeks. What I do think it is actually understanding the profiles of the people who are going to be making those decisions. Look, we are asking voters to make the same decisions on the people who are going to be sitting on their city council for the next 2 years in a period of time that is equivalently short. So I think if we can expect that of them, we can also hopefully expect that this regionalization effort can get itself into a proper gear to give us that perspective that we need on whether or not we can trust these individuals and these leaders.
The question, and for those who might be listening to one of these interviews for the first time, Middletown will have 2 questions on their ballot regarding the matter. Newport will have 1 question. All 3 have to pass for it to move forward. All 3 have to pass. It passes. There happens to be cost savings money. Where do you think those cost savings should go?
They should absolutely be redirected right back into our education system. We are dealing with a school population that has a substantial amount of need for non-traditional educational resources to ensure that they meet their full academic potential. You know, almost half of Newport's kids are living in single-parent households. A good majority are receiving federal assistance for free and reduced meals while at school. The reality is that we have a school population that, while it has great potential, is going to require a lot of community effort to help close the gap that they might have in other parts of their lives. We have wonderful nonprofits in our community. They're doing a lot of this work with very little assistance from the city itself. I think we need to redivert any savings that we receive from regionalization and invest back in our kids.
So you've had 3 full months of being a candidate after declaring at the end of June. What are you hearing out there? How has it been?
What I'm hearing very consistently is that residents want a council that is going to focus more on them. I think they appreciate the work that goes into making sure that we are a top tier destination for people who want to come visit. They just really want people who are willing to listen to them. I spend 2 to 4 hours a day knocking on doors. I've knocked on, coming up on 4,000 doors at this point. I've had over 1,000 one-on-one conversations with residents. And every week I do 2 or 3 meet and greets where we get 20 to 40 residents together and actually talk about what they're dealing, what they're feeling. They are feeling like they are being ignored, and they do not feel like they can hold on much longer unless the city redirects its attention and focus on them.
And over the last couple of months, you have picked up quite a few supporters as well as endorsements.
Yeah, the way that I've been able to build most of those supporters and endorsements is old fashioned. I go out and I knock on doors every single day. It's how I originally met Elizabeth Forte, the at-large counselor who recently endorsed me, who is stepping off the council. It was late on a Friday night in the summertime. I knocked on the door of her home. And she kind of looked at me and said, it's a Friday night in the summertime. This is what you're doing. I said, yeah, this is important. It's important to get out there into every neighborhood in Newport and listen to people. And I've gone from everywhere in Newport Heights all the way down to the Fifth Ward at this point. I'm going to keep going right to the election day because I think it's what helps us be well informed. And I also think it's what our residents deserve. They need counselors who are willing to get out and do the work of listening.
From what you've heard over the last 3 months, knocking on doors, as well as your own insight and watching, what's something that the current council has done well?
I think the current council has done an excellent job in maintaining Newport's position as the top destination in Rhode Island and one of the top destinations in the U.S. For people who want to come and visit. It feels like Newport becomes increasingly popular with every year that passes, and I think that that is a tremendous testament to the work that they have put in to ensure that we continue to be a very vibrant economy for tourism. I think we need to redirect that same attention and focus back onto our residents. I mean, I've met and sat with every single one of our counselors. I know how deeply they care about our community and residents. And I think that by having some fresh blood on that council, it'll help redirect the entire council to refocus on the issues that I know are important to them because they are also members of this community that grew up and were raised here and care deeply about it.
And just to group these two together, an opportunity or something that they haven't possibly called done well. Something that in the recent 2 years, something you wish would have gone the other way or something would have happened.
Yeah, I really do wish that they had gotten the homestead exemption through earlier. We're losing residents every day, and properties are converting bit by bit over into short-term rentals. So I think that they could have moved a lot quicker to get that homestead exemption through. That being said, if you want an example of a decision that I think should have been done differently, I would say the regulation of Airbnbs. We watched as the disruptive technologies that support short-term rentals came into the Newport marketplace and converted a lot of our existing housing stock for working families into short-term rentals. Now, on its own, I don't think Airbnb is an unhealthy thing that, particularly for Newport, right? We have a great tradition of hosting and welcoming people. I mean, if you think back all the way throughout history, even recently, I was just watching the documentary on Netflix, right? You have to think about all those people that we were putting up for America's Cup races. I host friends who are passing through at regattas constantly in the summertime. We are naturally Newport hosts. We love hosting people. You see the pineapples around everywhere you go in Newport, right? That's the original sign of welcome. Airbnb is a really good fit for households that want to take a part of their house and welcome somebody in to help show them a great town. The difference is that what happened in Newport wasn't that we had individual residents alone welcoming an Airbnb guest into a guest apartment or a spare room. We had entire homes being converted into short-term rentals. So what that does is it changes the character of our hosting in our community from being one where we welcome in guests and give them a really personalized experience to billeting tourists inside of our neighborhoods. And that was a problem. So what you saw the council do was be a little bit too slow to react to that change. They didn't get a policy implemented quickly enough, and the issue raged out of control and drove a level of investor demand in our residential neighborhoods that caused prices to skyrocket. When they ultimately did react, I think they overreacted. And the blanket ban that they put in place wasn't something that we could effectively enforce. In the midst of knocking on doors every single day, I will knock on the door of a home that in theory should be a residence, and in fact, it is an Airbnb. And I hear constantly from people that zoning just can't keep up with enforcing the illegal use of Airbnb and short-term rentals in this community. I think what we needed was a more tailored approach that limited Airbnbs to properties that are owned and operated by residents in such a way that we ensured that we don't have the wholesale conversion of middle-class working family homes into short-term unregulated rental properties.
What hope do we have now? What can we do now, if anything, to fix that?
Yeah, I think we need to go back and re-revise that policy. And then I think we need to look at the resourcing that we have for enforcement and zoning.
I was going to ask you when you were going door to door, whether if you came across, especially during the summer, if you came up, last election season, a lot of candidates talked about dark homes or bothering people who were renting the home out. The experience that you experienced over the last couple months?
Absolutely. Right. I mean, we go door to door, usually off the voter list, and you'll go for a block and you'll see, 3 or 4 homes that are dark in a row. And then you get to that 4th home and you knock on the door and it's somebody from out of state that's Airbnb. It's a major issue. And, traditionally you might have thought, okay, Airbnb and the yachting village, that might make a little bit of sense, but we're dealing with it now in those areas that are traditional residential neighborhoods, deep into the 5th Ward, up off Broadway. These are areas that weren't originally intended and didn't have a profile of being a short-term rental type neighborhood. And that's where we're seeing those dark houses that people keep talking about that I think is particularly concerning.
And something that's concerning to me is, candidates working off of voter lists, the registered voters in the city. But when they go to that house, it's a renter or somebody actually doesn't live there. A thing that went off in my head is, do we really know how many registered voters that we actually have in the city is a concern.
Yeah. Yeah.
When we jump back to the ballot, question number 4 talks about the state issuance of licenses for cannabis business in the city. And the question asks, shall new cannabis-related licenses for businesses involved in the cultivation, manufacture, laboratory testing, and for the retail sale of adult recreational use cannabis be issued in the city of Newport? Just where do you feel in moving this forward or holding it back or in cannabis in the city?
Yeah, I don't think it comports with our city's character. I also don't see us realistically having the right type of space to host facilities that offer recreational cannabis. We are a very dense city, and our commercial districts immediately abut and integrate into residential neighborhoods. And right now I see us already having a very tough time maintaining the balance that we have between people that are here to enjoy the wonderful hospitality that our city has to offer with the reality of us being able to live lives day to day. And I don't think that recreational cannabis facilities fit well into what's already a very tight landscape.
And some other candidates or current council members have brought up, possibly, or it's been kind of a rumor that possibly in the North End. What do you think? The biggest opportunity in Newport for building and for growth is in the North End. How would you like to see the North End grow?
Yeah, this is a once in a generation opportunity that we have. The thing about living on an island that you realize is we're not making more land. We don't have a whole lot of room for development. So to get a plot this large potentially for development is an incredible opportunity for Newport. But we really need to think about how we're going to go about getting it right. I think that having a blue tech focused district up there that also includes some level of mixed use with housing and retail is exactly the type of project that we need. The reality is that that land right now is really owned by two parties. Half of it is owned by a private developer who has proven themselves capable of developing very large projects like this in the past, but who we need to set very clear parameters and a clear process for. And the second portion of that is owned by the state. I sat on the state properties committee for a number of years. I know how the state goes about disposing of property. It is absolutely essential that the council has a very clear vision and a plan for how it's going to develop that property and how it's going to go about attracting industries if the state is going to be willing to hand over the keys for that property. So I think we need to start there and focus. I think blue tech makes sense for a few different reasons. First is that any company or industry that's coming into a space cares about the workforce. This is an area where we have demonstrated that we have not only an existing trained and specialized workforce that understands the space, but we're building a pipeline for one through organizations like IRIS. So we have things like the Naval Undersea Warfare Center, we have the Naval War College, we have Raytheon, we have that requisite group of companies that could help to incubate blue tech startups. We need to now think about how we go about attracting them there. The second thing you need is capital. An incredible amount of investors cycle through Newport every single summer as part of their normal day-to-day vacationing and time spent on the road. And it's because they love the ocean. So here we have a bunch of investors who love the ocean, who are coming to spend time here. It's a natural intersection for us between the talent pool that we have, our historic pedigree in the yachting and ocean industry, and the capital flowing through our state that we should be able to connect and hopefully deliver some real good, high-paying jobs for the people that live here in Newport.
So you are, speaking of the ocean, you're in the Point neighborhood, and it's knocking on your door. What do we do? What can City Council, what can you do about climate change here in Newport?
If there's a second issue that I cared about deeply, it would be water and specifically how we deal with stormwater itself. Our residents have experienced a rapid increase in their water and wastewater bills. And that's because we've built two plants that are now handling an enormous amount of capacity on both those fronts. The third area that we need to deal with that we aren't ready for right now is stormwater. When we think about climate change, we think a lot about sea level rise. The city has been doing a fair amount to help adapt to that. But what we really need to figure out how we manage right now is stormwater. The current approach the city's taking is a bit like whack-a-mole. They see a project, they pursue it, they put out that fire, and then they move to the next one when they see a problem. The issue that I'm seeing is that doesn't work, right? It's water, it's going to flow. So we need to have a comprehensive solution to deal with that. I chaired the governor's transition working group on infrastructure. I understand exactly how it is that we should go about pursuing it. And that's by having a plan, then having the resources in place to pursue federal funding to help us address that plan. The city itself should have a grant writer and a project manager specifically dedicated to helping us tackle this issue. Because if we don't, the increases that we've seen in the water and sewer bills are going to be just the start. And Newporters will not be able to keep their heads above water, either financially or literally.
Sai, you are one of 7 candidates. Remind us again, why people should put a check next to your name on the ballot.
I think that out of the gate, we need young, energetic leaders on that council who also are prepared to hit the ground running on day one. I have that background and experience to do that. I have a proven track record over the past almost 2 decades working in this specific space. And I'm a specialist that focuses on government finances and how we actually get policy implemented. I think that's the type of background we need to help get this council back in gear and back focused on residents again.
And a website or a way to contact you if people want to converse with you or want to find out more?
Xayfornewport.com, Xayfor Newport.com. Thanks, Ryan.
And is there anything that we missed today? We can only get to so much in about a half hour. Obviously, there's many more things I'm sure you could talk about. But anything else that you wanted to get out today?
Yeah, I think the big focus right now, is that Newport can be better. This is a great community. We have a lot to work with here. We have people who are serving on this council and other candidates who are running who are really dedicated to trying to make this a better community. So there's a lot of hope. And there's a lot of reason to think that we are going to be able to help tackle these challenges that we're currently facing and help residents. And I think that with the right team on that council, we're going to be able to get that done.
Excellent. Well, we wish you the very best of luck over the next couple of weeks. We'll be here before you know it. And you are on the ballot. And you are, again, 3 down on the ballot under nonpartisan council at large. And you're going to vote up to 4. 4 out of 7 will be your at-large council members. And we wish you the very best of luck over the next couple of weeks.
Thank you, Ryan. And thanks, everyone, for watching.
All right. Thank you, Cy. And if anybody missed any portion of this interview, want to rewatch it, want to share it, available on whatsupnuke.com, as well as our other candidate interviews, as well as our candidate interview schedule. You can find that all on whatsupnuke.com. You can find your sample ballot, find your polling place, make sure you're registered to vote, all on vote.ri.gov. And you can go on there and see your two-sided ballot. There is the front, which will have all of your local races, and then the back will have the 10 questions if you are in Newport. Vote.ri.gov. Thank you for watching.